All right. Welcome everybody.
House, so she knows what it's like to be in a big room.
So we're here this afternoon, the House Committee on Government Operations and Military Affairs, to hear an initial introduction and a brief walkthrough of S42. And so I would like to welcome Senator Clarkson to tee up our conversation about this bill and tell us about. So you were the reporter of the bill, right?
I'm one of the sponsors, a reporter. But I just want to begin by saying, first of all, I'm Allison Clarkson, Senator, Majority Leader, Windsor County District. And I just want to say it's been great to see so many of the House Government Operations people in Senate Government Operations, of course, the last week, and in Senate Economic Development. So thank you for your good work and all the things you've sent us. Second, I'd like to say I enjoyed divesting myself last night of all good sense and dancing to your chair's music at the Bent Nail. Thank you for all your many gifts, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Chief among them, giving us so much joy and pleasure last night. That being said, let me introduce you to a piece of work that many of us have wanted to do for a very long time. I think our first divestment bill was in 2012 when I was in the House. And so some of us have been working on this a long time. Many of my colleagues don't feel we've gone far enough. I will point out this is the furthest a divestment bill has made it yet to the other body. So we're starting at least with having gotten it to you. And so for me, this is a win-win for our state. This is a win for Vermont and its pension funds and a win for Vermont's economy. Not economy, well, that too, but for Vermont's environment. The bill that you have in front of you, S42, is the result of really productive negotiations that between the treasurer and his office, Third Act, which is a very strong environmental group started by Bill McKibben, VPIC, the Vermont Pension Investment Commission, which this committee helped put together last biennium along with our committee, Tom Zenzillo, a former controller of the state of New York and an expert on pension funds and divestment, and Senate GovOps. I just wanted to give you a notion that this wouldn't have happened without, in many ways, without the treasurer stepping in and helping negotiate what you see before you. And this is a step forward. It's not a leap forward, but it's a step forward to divesting the pension funds of fossil fuels while protecting the pension funds and the ADEC, the actuarially determined employer contribution. So there is nothing rash here. This is done in a very thoughtful and measured way. The bill proposes a phased-in approach to divestment, and here are the three key elements of the bill. First, we're establishing a review of the pension funds. We have no idea what our fossil fuel exposure is or what we hold in the portfolio. So until we know, we don't have a sense of what it would cost us to divest. We have no picture of what our engagement is with the fossil fuel industry. So that by next February, we'd have a full picture of what fossil fuel investments in our pension funds actually are. Second, we're establishing a shorter and longer term goal for a divestment process. And third, we provide the staff support, which got stripped some of the money, but they're also supporting some of this themselves, both from the general fund and from their own investments to help create this plan and to develop this work. So for me, it's important to many of us that Vermont be consistent in our policy. So on one side of the hall, we are actively trying to reduce our global warming footprint and actually trying to wean ourselves from fossil fuels. And on the other side of the hall, we're still investing in fossil fuel industry. So for me, it's very important that we be consistent with our policy and our investments. We shouldn't be using state funds to support activities we are trying to phase out. We shouldn't be using our Global Warming Solutions Act goals for reducing the state's carbon footprint through our emissions. So we shouldn't actively be investing in something that we're trying to eliminate. However, our carbon footprint is also in our investments, and this bill puts us on the path to decarbonizing them as well. So last year, 2 weeks ago, the UN, that you are probably aware of, the UN said that if we were to meet the goal of limiting global warming to the 1.5 degrees Celsius they have all wanted, all new fossil fuel development must stop immediately. Divestment moves us toward this goal, supporting that goal by depriving Vermont fossil fuel industry. Sorry, I apologize. By depriving the fossil fuel industry of further capital that it needs to fund new fossil fuel developments. Vermont pensions should not be invested in industries that are harming Vermonters by furthering global warming. With this bill, Vermont joins a bunch of states and a bunch of jurisdictions: Maine, New York State, New York City, Washington, D.C., Chicago, Baltimore. There are quite a few, and 71 countries and over 1,400 institutions, universities you've read most about. They've certainly gotten the most attention, have committed to divesting from their fossil fuel investments, representing an astonishing $39 trillion of assets. So this represents another way for Vermont to contribute less to the problem of global warming. And I'm going to I assume you have Ledge Council walking. Is Becky in here?
She's on.
Okay. Are you behind me, Becky? She is. There she is. How nice. Anyway. In 3 sections, the bill does the following. It sets out our intent to have VPIC divest the pension funds of fossil fuel investments over the next 17 years. It requires VPIC in consultation with the treasurer to review, take an inventory of what the carbon footprint actually is, and report back to us next February. And it requires VPIC to develop a plan to divest with a process that has benchmarks of 2030 and 2040. And it requires, obviously, reporting back to us every January. It appropriates money which has been sucked out, but it appropriated money to actually do this work, which we hope will actually make it through in the final analysis, and money from their own pension funds to do the further work of developing a plan to divest. As Treasurer Pieciak testified, this bill addresses VPIC's concerns by making clear that divestment is to take place only if it is financially prudent and consistent with sound fiduciary practice. We have also invested heavily in shoring up our pension funds, as those of us who've been here for a while know. So we are not about to do anything to undermine that good work. And he feels confident that, and you'll hear from Mike, I'm sure, he feels confident that nothing we're doing here puts any of those pension funds in jeopardy. While VPIC has not endorsed this final bill, they worked with us all the way through and then pulled out at the last minute, and they have their reasons. They gave extensive input into the development of it, and it addresses their concerns and identifies them as designing the divestment plan, which drives many of the decisions. The bill gives VPIC flexibility in planning and implementing the divestment by leaving it to VPIC, and VPIC gets to define what a fossil fuel company is. It creates exemptions for private investments and de minimis investments in fossil fuels, as defined. De minimis is defined as less than 2% of VPIC's total holdings. And let's see, there is a third and fourth I am missing. It is right here. Sorry. The bill sets a target date of divestments by 2030 for mutual and index funds, which are less thorny to untangle. And for private investments or private equity, the bill sets a goal of divestment by 2040, only if VPIC determines that the exemptions for private equity are not needed and the divestment is consistent, again, with sound fiduciary practice. The bill recognizes and builds on the excellent work VPIC has already been doing to decarbonize the pension fund and to engage with companies to encourage them to further divest and to participate in shareholder advocacy on environmental, social, and governmental issue and governance issues. So you'll hear from all sorts of people. There were teachers who were very supportive of this work. The bill will help protect pensioners' savings because increasingly fossil fuels are a challenging investment with potential liability for the companies. Clean energy such as wind and solar are now less expensive. Market forces favor those sustainable alternatives, and fossil fuel companies face the perspective of massive lawsuits. It's very similar to what we've seen with tobacco and what we're now seeing with drug companies. So we also have to be cognizant if we want to limit our exposure and to those kinds of liabilities and to the downturn of their value as a result. Many studies have shown that divested funds perform the same or better than funds that have been divested, than funds that have remained that are not divested. So, from our point of view, divestment from fossil fuels would be a sound fiduciary practice for us. I'll just leave you with a former teacher. We had a very moving testimony from a former teacher, a pensioner, who testified in our committee and said, "I'm convinced there is no conflict between divestment from fossil fuels and fiduciary responsibility. But for those pension holders and taxpayers who worry that divestment might negatively affect the state's pension investments, this bill provides an additional financial safeguard in that it specifically directs VPIC to provide, to divest, quote, in accordance with sound investment criteria and consistent with fiduciary obligations." The teacher says, "I've started asking other pensioners how they feel about divestment, and they are relieved that this bill offers another chance at divestment because they've been wanting to see it happen for many years." For those of you who've been here, our former treasurer was not supportive of divestment. She was very supportive of engagement. We think that time has come and gone. And when they've heard that the bill stipulates divestment with fiduciary responsibility, they had no qualms about supporting it. I would like to think that the teaching I did was part of my legacy, but an even more important legacy would be to leave behind a world that is beginning to recover from the climate emergency. Divestment is a step toward that legacy. And, you'll hear hopefully from Bill McKibben, who, needless to say, says Vermont, by divesting, will strike an important blow, both symbolic and practical, in the climate fight. It will protect pensioners' savings, but it will also help protect the planet on which all of us hope to retire. This bill strikes a very livable balance, we feel, between our goals to reduce fossil fuel investments and the way we can practically implement these goals without harming the pension funds we've worked so hard to protect and to shore up. We need to use everything in our power to slow climate change. Divestment is an additional tool we can use in our efforts to protect Vermont's environment, its people, and our planet. And divestment is a step toward our legacy. So thank you. And with that, I am done.
Thank you very much, Senator Clarkson. So committee, we will, when we take testimony on this in the coming week or so, I know Chair Galanka had some further comments, and I think that there were periods, what I'm hearing from you, Senator Clarkson, where VPIC was very engaged.
Oh, yeah.
And it seems like right toward the end of the Senate.
Until the last day.
Yeah, until the last day, there was some new concerns were raised. So we'll hear about some of those things. And he had specific objections that were areas that we could work on in a memo that was sent this morning. So I just wanted you to know, on top of the effort to collaborate with the different stakeholders that you went through, that there's some additional recommendations that we'll have to put on the table if we're going to move this bill forward. One of those things I wanted to ask you about was if you had discussed there's language that Chair Kalanka brought up.
And I just would like to point out also that Mike Pichek, our treasurer, is continuing to engage and discuss how we can satisfy some of their concerns. So we know there's ongoing work on this, which is great. I mean,
So Chair Galanka, the one piece of the series of recommendations that he made for us to look into, talked about some Texas language that they used to exempt the members of of VPIC from some of the liability related.
for the future liabilities.
Yeah.
There's future liabilities may be astronomical. So I don't know what would protect us if you begin to get the lawsuits on how damaged our environment is. But that being said, no, we did not. Not that I recall, but remember they had conversations outside, on their own between the four parties. So I don't recall the Texas, and Tom may be shocked. I don't, but I don't recall it. And so I'm happy to look at it and happy to get back to you about our committee. I don't believe discussed that. And if so, I'm not remembering it.
Representative Hooper has his hand up. Thank you for pointing that out to me. I wasn't looking at the Zoom screen.
Hooper is a member of VPIC.
Yes, as we well know.
So is the treasurer.
Yes, I know.
So Senator Clarkson, I would like to know if the committee has any kind of conceptual formulary on what a fossil fuel company is, because the common perception is it's Amoco drilling a hole in the ground and pumping something out. But if I paint my house, I'm using a fossil fuel. If I take certain drugs, I'm using a fossil fuel. If I go to the hospital and get a catheter, I'm using a fossil fuel. There's a lot of tentacles on this. And that's question one. Question two is.
Let me answer question one, because I may not remember it.
Okay.
So question one is, it's up to you to define it.
Okay. Well, that was solely my question, because if we define it one way and that doesn't meet the need, then we're not done with this, and we keep going back and forth. And I think everybody would like to be done with it at some point. There will be an increase in cost. I can't see any way around that. So I wonder if the state is going to hold VPIC harmless on the increase in the ADEC. And then thirdly, what Mike was just talking about in Texas, I think was, we also have to conform to the prudent investor rule. So we're questioning whether or not the Texas example provides indemnification in that regard for the actual VPIC members.
I can't speak to the Texas piece. I will clarify, we do not know any of the costs, Bob, in all fairness. That's why we're doing the review and the report comes back in February. So we don't know the cost. And it may actually end up, we don't know the answer to that question. And that's why we want to have the science and the data before we make any further decisions, both you and us. And as you know, our work is never done. So if there are new issues that are raised, the legislature is so flexible, it turns every year to solving problems that are raised during the course of the interim period, if necessary.
But I do want to say that for the purposes of this afternoon after a long week, that when we take further testimony on this, we'll have lots of time to sort of dig into some of the details. What I wanted to try to do today was just get at what was Senate GovOps work, what were the broad topics that we need to delve into. And Representative Hooper, I know with your extensive experience in this area that you could probably spar with the reporter of this bill at length. And I don't think we have the energy or the time for that today, but we will get into it if we do further work.
Step into the hall,
Well, no desire to spar with Senator Clarkson unless
I don't think we're sparring. And
at the bent nail, maybe.
I missed you at the bent nail last night. I hope you do take it up. I hope you get the full range of all the input that was given from Tom, from Bob, from Mike Pichek, very important for you to hear from, and from Third Act, and Bill McKibben, if you can get him. I just want to point out, we've been working on trying to do this for many, many years. We feel confident now it will not harm our pension funds. They have not yet met their up 7% hope of what they are returning every year to their pensioners. So, I mean, it's this, I don't think this will harm that in any way, shape, or form. So more to follow, but I think this gives us the tools to understand better as we go along this process. We have a long time to do this work.
Senator Clarkson, thank you.
Thank you.
Spending some of the afternoon with us here, and have a lovely weekend.
Oh, off to my committee and to lunch. Thank you very much. And Becky did a rocking job on this, so you have the best person next. Thanks. Thank you, everybody. Have fun.
Thank you.
The
time.
Good to see you all.
Becky, thank you for being with us, and I'm sure you can get a flavor for some of the questions that we're going to be delving into, but I wanted to at least do our initial walkthrough and know what's in the bill before we wrap up for the week. So thanks for being here.
Great. Becky Wasserman, Legislative Counsel. Can you remind me if you'd like me to share my screen?
No, we have it up on
Okay.
our agenda. That's our practice here. Thank you. That way we can see you too when you're testifying remotely.
Yes. Let me just get my. Great. So S42 is an act relating to divestment of state pension funds of investments in the fossil fuel industry. Do you want me to do a full sort of line by line walkthrough at this
You
point?
don't need to do a line by line. I'd love to do kind of a section by section and just hit the highlights of kind of what the Senate put in the bill. It's been a long week and a lot of long charter line by lines the last couple of days. So I'm trying to be merciful to my committee here.
Understood. Okay. Okay. So section 1 of the bill, as you heard, the idea is that there will be a review of the investments of the three retirement systems. And then based on that, there will be a plan that's built to divest from certain holdings. So subsection A is an intent section with respect to this whole process. So there's first some intent language about VPIC in A1 that is saying that VPIC should build upon the effective efforts to manage risks that they've already been doing in this area, and supporting initial studies and reviews on climate change. And then subdivision 2 lays out intent about the divestment. So this says that by December 31st, 2030, and this is sort of a tough sentence because there's so many sort of limitations in here, but it's asking VPIC consistent with with sound fiduciary practice. And by that, they mean to include consideration of any expected increased funding requirements for the ADAC and administrative costs, and subject to any exceptions that are laid out further along in the bill. They should divest the holdings of the state employees retirement system, the teachers retirement system, and the municipal employees retirement system from the fossil fuel industry. And I will get to what all those exceptions are in a little bit. But subdivision 3 speaks to one of them, which is an exception for private investments that contain assets in the fossil fuel industry. So with respect to those particular types of investment, there's also intent language that VPIC should establish a long-term goal to divest from those private investments by December 31st, 2040, if they determine that such divestment is consistent with sound fiduciary practice. So there's the December 31st, 2030 date, and then a goal for most investments, and then a goal of December 31st, 2040 for the private investments that contain assets in the fossil fuel industry. Subsection B are some definitions. So there's a definition for a carbon footprint, which is the extent to which holdings are invested in stock, securities, or other obligations of any fossil fuel company or any subsidiary, affiliate, or parent of that company. And then there's a definition of de minimis exposure, because this goes to one of the exceptions to this plan. So that means the aggregate amount of all fossil fuel holdings in a portfolio that is less than 2% of the aggregate amount of all funds invested. Okay. Subsection C is the review. So this is asking VPIC by December 15th, 2023, in consultation with the State Treasurer's Office, to review complete a review of the carbon footprint of the holdings of the 3 retirement systems. So that will give an idea of what, what are they looking, they have to identify all the holdings first before they can come up with a plan. And then subsection D speaks to the actual divestment plan. So except for the exceptions that are in subdivision 2, the commission, in accordance with sound investment criteria and consistent with fiduciary obligations, and again, that includes consideration of how this impacts increased funding requirements for ADAC and other administrative costs. So VPIC will develop a plan to divest any holdings that are identified in that review by December 31st, 2030. And as part of that plan, although it's an exception to the plan, the commission is also being asked to include consideration of their long-term goal of divestment from any investments in the exceptions to the plan. So what are these exceptions? That is laid out on page 3. I'm on line 8, subdivision 2. So until such time as VPIC deems divestment to be prudent and consistent with sound fiduciary practice, certain holdings are accepted from the plan. So first is a de minimis exposure of any funds held by the commission to the stock, securities, or other obligations of a fossil fuel company or any subsidiary, affiliate, or parent of a fossil fuel company. And then what is also accepted are private investments that contain those fossil fuel company stock, securities, or other obligations of subsidiary, affiliate, or parent companies of that fossil fuel company. Subdivision 3 has some other information that the commission is being asked to include in the plan. So first, I think this goes to one of the questions that was just raised with Senator Clarkson. The commission should include a definition for fossil fuel company. And then I'm moving to top of page 4. There should also be a method included for determining the metric of the portfolio's carbon footprint that allows for an exemption of private investments for the purpose of determining that de minimis exposure, so that less than 2%. And then in subsection E on page 4, there are a number of reporting requirements in this bill. So first, with respect to the review that's going to be done, the commission is asked to submit a report on that review by February 15th, 2024 to this committee and the Senate GovOps committee, as well as to the Joint Pension Oversight Committee. And that report should include recommendations for legislative action, if necessary, to implement the divestment plan. And then the next report would be due in September 1st of 2024. The commission would submit a report on the plan for divestment to the same 3 committees: House GovOps and Military Affairs, Senate GovOps, and Joint Pension Oversight. And this would also include any recommendations for legislative action. So the bottom of page 4, starting on line 17, there is some language that allows the House and Senate GovOps committees to meet with the approval of the speaker and the pro tem at least one time when the General Assembly is not in session to evaluate the report of the plan that comes in September. And then on page 5, line 3, there is the next report is an annual report that will start January 15th, 2025 and go until January 15th, 2040. And this goes to the same 3 committees, and it is meant to sort of update the legislature on the progress of divestment. So that would include an update on the composition and percentage of exposure of any investments that are exempt from the divestment plan, and as well as a summary of the fee impacts in any instance of excessive charges or demands relating to the rebalancing of the funds so that it's consistent with the implementation of the Act. And then finally, there's a report due January 15th, 2041 by VPIC on the it's a final report on the completion of divestment. And then top of page 6, section 2 of the bill, there's an appropriation to VPIC for a staff position to support improvements and efficiency in the administration of VPIC and to meet the review, planning, and reporting requirements of this Act. And the way that appropriation is being sourced is by certain percentages from each of the 3 retirement funds. So 40.86% from the State Employees Retirement Fund, 44.01% from the Teachers Retirement Fund, and then 15.13% from the Municipal Employees Retirement Fund. There was an additional appropriation in the bill as it came out of Senate GovOps for hiring for technical assistance for this plan, and I believe Senate Appropriations removed that, and I think the plan is to put in the budget, but I will have to double check on that. And then finally, section 3, the effective date is effect on passage.
It seems pretty straightforward. So we've got the 2030 and the 2040 goals, the reports, and the staffing. Does anybody have any questions at this point about the words on the page? I really appreciate everyone, especially Becky, being willing to do this piece of this work so that we can actually get into testimony the next time that we do this on this Friday afternoon.
Just one comment, or I've got as a kind of an umbrella thing on this is, and I'm sure we'll probably talk to some of these folks, but just what do pensioners think of it? Because they're the ones that are going to pay the price if it goes in the wrong direction. Just a general statement on my part, I'm thinking out loud as we're going through this, because there'd be the people that would potentially be impacted.
We'll definitely hear from them, their representatives on the various retirement committees if we move this forward. I think that or retirement boards, I should say. What occurs to me is that there's an assumption underlying this bill that it is responsible fiduciary policy to divest. And then there seems to be some outs if it appears that it's not. And so we need to learn more about what that really means, what those assumptions really mean.
And if that's in there,
yeah. But that's kind of the underlying thing is this assumption that it is fiduciarily responsible to divest, and that we may find out that it's not the case. Representative Hango.
Thank you. And I would also like to learn a little bit more about who actually does the physical management of these investments. Is it in an investment firm? Is it a professional? Is it the VPIC board? So I'd like to learn a little more about that, please.
One of the things I'm really excited about that is related to this bill, but is not the heart of the question that this bill presents, is just it's an opportunity for us to dig in a little bit more about how our pensions are invested and who controls those. Those of us who are on the committee last couple of years got really deep into that, set up VPIC as it's currently constituted. Chair Galanka, is already communicating with our committee through the memo he sent today about this. But I think taking a step back before we dive into these specific things and covering those questions, Representative Hango, is exactly what we should do, because it'll inform all of our future work and be useful for.
It really is just like, it's a blend of a lot of different like investment vehicles that compose these buckets.
We saw some of this when we had the treasurer come in about the way our pension funds are invested, but I think it's going to be really good to go back to some of that when we have Treasurer Pichak and Chair Galanka and others in to really understand what are these billions and billions of dollars of pension funds really invested.
This one's pretty deep.
Yeah, it is, but it'll allow us to learn more about all of that pension work that's part of this committee's jurisdiction. So I'm actually excited about that opportunity to have a real vehicle for all of us to dive in and learn about that, but not going to do that with everybody on a Friday afternoon. So.
We get our work in 1 hour.
Representative Hooper.
Following up on your comment, if anybody's bored this weekend, all of that information is pretty much represented on VPIC's website.
That's good. Yeah.
Bob, I'll review it with you at 5 tomorrow evening.
I will not be present at that meeting.
No quorum.
I will be blood zero.
Monday or Tuesday is fine, everybody. Take a look at the VPIC website. I think that's a very good suggestion, Representative Hooper. We're all being a little punchy and sarcastic here this afternoon, I can tell. Committee, we're gonna pick up some charter work next week on Tuesday afternoon. Wednesday, we'll be doing a lot of testimony about S-17, the sheriff's bill. And that's about as far ahead as my brain can work right now, but preview of coming attractions. Thank you, Becky, for being here this afternoon. I really wish everybody, if you're celebrating Passover or Easter, have some wonderful time with your family this weekend, and to get some rest, because we have a lot of work to do next week. And Ramadan, yes.
All three celebration.
Everything lined up this week.
Okay,
Thank you.
Yeah, that's unusual.
Together all the time.
Thank you.